Shane Tucker had a nail between his teeth, sweat on his brow, and a deadline hanging over his head like the summer storm rolling in from the east. "Dad, are we going to make it home before the rain?" Little Brandon asked from the driveway, his Buzz Lightyear backpack resting beside his feet. Shane glanced down at his 6-year-old son and gave him a tired smile. "We'll try, bud. Just gotta finish patching this part of the roof." "Won't take long." The house in question was a 2-story colonial tucked in a quiet part of town where the lawns were trimmed like golf courses and the mailboxes didn't lean. The woman who lived here, Mara Jennings, had called for an emergency repair after a tree limb tore through her roof during last night's storm. Shane had taken the job even though it meant working overtime. He needed the extra cash. Rent was late. Again. Mara hadn't said much when she'd opened the door earlier that afternoon. She wore jeans and a plain white tee, her dark hair twisted into a bun, no makeup. She didn't look like the type who lived in a house like this, too quiet, too kind-eyed. She'd offered him lemonade and told Brandon he could sit on the porch. That was it. What Shane didn't know was that Mara could have paid 10 times his quote and not blinked. Because Mara Jennings wasn't just another client, she was the billionaire CEO of Jennings & Vale, a global tech company headquartered just outside the city. She was used to boardrooms, not broken shingles, but no one in this neighborhood knew who she really was, and she liked it that way. Mara stood by the window now, watching him work from behind the curtain. There was something different about this one. Most contractors barked orders or tried to flirt, but Shane was careful, focused, and the way he talked to his son, gentle, patient. It stirred something she hadn't felt in a long time. She turned away from the window just as thunder rumbled in the distance. Out on the roof, Shane hammered the last shingle in place and climbed down the ladder. "All done," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You're sealed up for now. Should hold through the next few storms, but eventually you'll want to replace the whole section." Mara stepped onto the porch, her arms crossed lightly. "Thank you, that was fast." "Had no choice," Shane said, glancing at the dark clouds. "Didn't want to get stuck mid-job with my kid here." Mara looked at Brandon, who was now crouched near the walkway, chasing ants with a twig. "He's adorable," she said genuinely. Shane nodded. "He's my world." There was a pause. Then Mara asked, "How much do I owe you?" Shane hesitated. "Honestly, the quote I gave you was low. Materials weren't cheap and I stayed late, but..." He trailed off, scratching the back of his neck. "Forget it, just the quote. 200. Mara blinked. "That's it?" "Yeah," he smiled, embarrassed. "I know it's not professional to cut deals, but things are tight right now, and I didn't want to cancel on you." She stared at him for a second, then disappeared into the house. She returned with a check and handed it to him. "Thanks," he said, folding it without looking. "Appreciate it. Don't you want to check it? I trust you." Mara tilted her head. "That's rare." He gave her a tired grin. "Guess I'm old-fashioned. Old-fashioned's nice sometimes." He was walking back to the truck when she called out, "Hey, Shane," he turned. "Would you ever consider coming back? There's more work I need done. Inside the house. And you seem trustworthy." Shane hesitated. "I'd have to bring Brandon. I don't have anyone to watch him while I work." "I don't mind," Mara said. "He can hang out in the living room or the yard. I've got plenty of space." Brandon perked up. "Do you have a dog?" Mara laughed softly. "Not yet, but maybe someday." Shane studied her for a moment. She didn't seem like she was pretending. She seemed lonely and kind. "All right," he said. "I'll stop by tomorrow." The next few weeks passed in a blur of hammering, drilling, and shared takeout lunches on Mara's porch. Shane fixed her leaky kitchen faucet, repaired a busted banister, and patched drywall in the guest room. Brandon played in the yard, sometimes bringing Mara dandelions or showing her his drawings. Mara found herself waiting by the window every morning, hoping Shane would show up even earlier. She laughed more, ate more, slept better. She'd built an empire, but being around that little boy and his quiet, strong father brought her something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Shane tried not to think about how her smile made his chest ache. She was beautiful, sure, but out of his league. This was just another job. A really nice job with a really sweet woman. That's it. But the day she brought him coffee in a mug that said "World's Best Dad," something cracked open. He looked at the mug, then at her. "You buy this just for me?" Mara shrugged. "Maybe." He stared at her. "Why?" She looked down. Because you are, and because I thought, you might need to hear it. He didn't know what to say. That night, after Brandon fell asleep in the truck, Shane sat in the driveway a long time staring up at the stars. He was falling for her, hard. He didn't know who she really was. Didn't know that her last name was on the side of half the buildings downtown. Didn't know she'd grown up in penthouses and flown first class since she was 6. All he knew was that she made him feel seen, and he hadn't had that in a long, long time. 2 days later, the rain came again. A storm like the one that brought them together. Mara had invited them in for dinner, real dinner, not takeout. She'd cooked. Shane had never tasted anything like it. After Brandon fell asleep on the couch watching a movie, Mara poured 2 glasses of wine and led Shane out onto the back patio. The sky was loud with thunder, but under the awning it felt safe. I don't usually do this, Mara said, voice low. Do what? Let anyone in? He looked at her. Me neither. They were quiet for a moment, then she asked, what happened to Brandon's mom? Shane's jaw tightened. She left. Said she wasn't made for this kind of life. Didn't want to be a mom, took off when Brandon was 2. I'm sorry, he nodded. It's okay, we're better off. She reached for his hand. He's lucky to have you, I'm lucky to have him. The rain started falling harder, their hands stayed locked. Shane turned to her slowly. Mara. Yeah, can I kiss you? She didn't answer, she just leaned in. The kiss was soft, hesitant, then fuller, deeper, like everything they hadn't said poured into that one moment. When they pulled apart, she whispered, come back tomorrow, I will. And for the first time in years, Shane went to bed smiling. He didn't know she was a billionaire, but he knew he was already half in love. The morning after the kiss, Mara barely tasted her coffee. Her hands fidgeted around the ceramic rim of the mug as she sat at the kitchen island, forcing herself to stare at the news on her tablet. But the words blurred, useless against the echo of Shane's lips on hers. There had been nothing rushed about the way he touched her, nothing careless. It had been deliberate, honest, and now she had a problem. Because the man she was falling for had no idea she was the majority shareholder of Jennings and Vale, a tech conglomerate valued in the billions. He thought she was just another woman in a quiet neighborhood with a leaky roof and creaky stairs. And for weeks, she'd let him believe that. Mara closed the tablet and stood abruptly. She grabbed her keys, locked the front door behind her, and drove straight to the office tower downtown where no one called her Mara, they called her Miss Jennings. The top floor was silent, sleek, and trimmed in brushed steel and tempered glass. Her assistant, Camille, rose when she entered. You weren't scheduled to come in today. I needed to clear my head, Mara said, brushing past her. Hold all calls. Inside her private office, she stared out at the skyline, arms folded. She hadn't stepped foot in this building since the storm, since Shane. It felt like another life. The intercom buzzed. Your brother is here. Mara didn't turn. Send him in. The door opened and Julian Jennings strolled inside, suit impeccable, tie loosened like always. He dropped into a chair and kicked one leg over the other. You've been off the radar. I've been busy, Mara said. With what? The board's been asking questions. You missed the last 2 strategy meetings. You're not responding to internal memos. I'm aware, Julian studied her. Is this about the thing you mentioned before? That guy, Mara's eyes flicked to him. His name is Shane. Right. The contractor. She didn't answer. Julian leaned forward. Mara, I don't care if you want to date someone outside of your tax bracket, but you need to be smart. If he finds out who you are, he's not like that. Julian raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. You've known him how long? Long enough to know when someone's real. And if he finds out you've been lying to him? Mara looked away. Julian's tone softened. You've always been careful. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment now. Mara turned from the window. I'm not asking for your approval. No, but you might want to think about what happens when your 2 worlds collide. Later that afternoon, Mara pulled into the gravel driveway of a modest blue duplex on the edge of town. A tricycle was overturned near the porch. A pair of boots sat beside the door. She hesitated before knocking. Brandon answered, blinking up at her with a juice box in hand. Hi, she smiled. Hi, Brandon, is your dad home? Yeah, he's fixing the sink again. It makes weird noises. Shane appeared behind him, wiping his hands on a towel. His expression shifted the second he saw her. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, stepping outside and gently nudging the door closed behind him. I was in the area. He gave a short laugh. You were in this area, she winced. Okay, I wanted to see you. Shane leaned against the railing, arms crossed. Everything all right, Mara nodded, eyes unsure. Can we talk somewhere, alone? He gestured toward the sidewalk. Walk with me. They strolled in silence past cracked pavement and rusting mailboxes. The sun hung low, washing everything in gold. I keep thinking, Mara said finally, about that night on your porch. Me too, Shane said quietly. She stopped walking. There's something I haven't told you. And I need to before this goes any further. He turned to her, expression guarded but open. I'm not just some woman in a nice house, Mara began. My name is Mara Jennings, of Jennings and Vale. Shane's brows pulled together. The tech company, she nodded slowly. I'm the founder. And CEO, he didn't speak. I didn't mean to hide it. I like being seen as a person, not a brand, and with you I could breathe. I didn't want to ruin that. Shane looked out across the street, jaw clenched. So all this time, I'm sorry. He shook his head. I'm not mad about who you are, Mara. I'm mad you didn't trust me with it. She took a step toward him. I was scared. Every time someone finds out they change, you didn't. I wouldn't have. I know that now. Shane looked down at the sidewalk, then back at her. This doesn't change how I feel, but it makes me wonder if I ever really knew you. You do, she said, voice tight. Better than anyone. Brandon's voice called from the porch, distant but clear. Dad, the sink's doing the thing again. Shane didn't move right away. Then finally, he said, I need some time. Mara nodded. I'll wait. As she watched him walk back toward his house, her chest ached with a new kind of fear, the kind that comes when you finally have something to lose. Shane didn't show up the next day, or the one after that. Mara stared at her phone often, willing it to ring even once. But it stayed silent, resting on the marble countertop of a home that suddenly felt too big for one person. She went through the motions, emails, meetings, reviewing quarterly projections, but nothing cut through the hollow ache in her chest. She'd told the truth, and still lost something that felt more real than anything her net worth had ever brought her. 3 mornings later, she was in the middle of reviewing a proposal for an overseas expansion when Camille stepped into her office. There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. Mara looked up slowly. Who? Camille hesitated. A man named Shane Tucker. He says he won't come in unless you want to see him. Mara stood so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the cabinet behind her. She didn't bother fixing it. Send him in. Shane stepped through the glass door, his jacket damp from the light drizzle outside. His boots left faint marks on the polished floor. This is different, he said, glancing around her office. Mara nodded, her heart pounding. I didn't expect you here. Well, I wasn't sure how to reach you without showing up like this. You never gave me your last name. He didn't smile, but his eyes weren't cold, just tired, thoughtful. I wasn't ready for that conversation, he said, but I've had time to think. Mara pressed her palms to the edge of her desk. And I don't care that you're wealthy. I care that you didn't tell me when it mattered, but I also understand why. I've been judged my whole life for what I don't have, for what I can't give, and I think maybe you've been judged too, just for different reasons. She swallowed hard. I never meant to lie. I just didn't want to lead with what I am on paper. I get that now, Shane said, but I've got Brandon to think about. He doesn't need chaos. He needs people who are steady. Mara stepped around the desk slowly. I'm not looking to disrupt your lives. I just want the chance to be part of them. He studied her for a moment, then pulled something from his jacket pocket. It was a folded piece of construction paper, the edges slightly wrinkled. He handed it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside was a crayon drawing 3 stick figures standing under a red roof, one small, one tall, and one with a bun. Brandon drew that yesterday, Shane said. Said he missed the porch lady. Mara's throat tightened. He's incredible. I know, Shane said quietly. And I think he already loves you. She looked up. Do you? I'm trying not to, he said, but it's not working. Her eyes shimmered. Then stop trying. Shane reached for her hand. You scare me, Mara. Not because of what you have, but because I don't know how to protect you from the life I live. I can't give you a driver or a house with 10 bathrooms. I can't even guarantee the sink won't leak next week. I don't need guarantees, she said. I need someone who means what he says, who shows up. And you've done that every single time. There was a beat of silence, then Shane stepped closer. "I don't want to be a footnote in your life," he said. "I want you to be part of mine." Mara's voice shook. "Then let me in." He kissed her right there in her office, surrounded by glass and steel and the quiet hum of wealth that had never meant much until now. It wasn't rushed or stolen. It was earned. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I want Brandon to come over tonight," she whispered. "For dinner, I'll cook again, something better this time." He gave a soft laugh. "You're a better cook than you think. And after dinner," she added, "maybe we can all watch a movie, if that's okay." "I think he'd love that," Shane said. As they walked out of the office together, Camille blinked in disbelief. Shane gave her a polite nod. Mara didn't say a word. She just laced her fingers through his like it was the most natural thing in the world. That night, she opened every window in the house to let in the sound of the rain. She set 3 plates at the table and rearranged the living room cushions so Brandon could sit on the floor and watch his favorite cartoon. And when they arrived, Brandon bounding through the door with a paper airplane in hand, Shane trailing behind with cautious hope, Mara knew this was what love looked like. Not grand entrances or gala gowns, but a child's laughter in her hallway, and the man who brought it all to her doorstep. Mara stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, arranging the last of the roasted carrots onto the platter. She didn't reach for her phone, didn't check her emails. Everything that mattered was already in her house. Shane's low voice floated in from the living room, reading the final pages of a picture book aloud. Brandon's giggle responded, bright and free. She paused, her hand hovering over the oven mitts, listening to the rhythm of their voices. There was no pretense here. No boardroom pressure or headlines waiting to pounce. Just the sound of a child feeling safe. And a man who had no idea how extraordinary he truly was. She carried the dish into the dining room just as Shane and Brandon entered. Brandon's cheeks were flushed from laughing, and he was holding a paper crown made of foil and construction paper. "I'm officially the king of snacks," he declared, climbing into his chair. Shane raised an eyebrow. "He negotiated 3 cookies before dinner. I caved," Mara laughed. A fair monarch knows when to bend the rules. Dinner passed with quiet conversation and clinking silverware. Shane offered to help clean, but Mara waved him off and stacked the plates herself. When she returned to the living room, she found Brandon curled up on the couch, eyes fluttering closed. "He's out," Shane said softly, lifting a blanket over him. Mara leaned against the doorway, watching them. "He feels at home here." "I think he does," Shane said, "and I know why." She turned toward him. "You do, you made a place for us without asking for anything." She stepped closer. "I didn't need to ask, I wanted you here." He looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "I've been thinking about something." Mara's brow lifted. "That usually sounds like trouble." "I'm serious." Shane reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "This was in my mailbox this morning, from the city housing office." She took it, opening it slowly. Her eyes scanned the page. "They're selling your duplex, raising the rent. Again, I can't afford it now, not with the new terms." Mara's jaw tightened. "You could move in here." Shane met her gaze. "I thought about that. But I don't want it to feel like charity, like we're just guests in your world." Mara stepped forward. "Then let's make a new one." He stared at her. "I bought a piece of land," she continued, "months ago. Out near the lake. I was going to build a retreat center, but I never started the project. Too many excuses. But now I'm thinking maybe it was waiting for something real." Shane folded his arms. "You're talking about building a house. I'm talking about building a life," she said. "With you. With Brandon, if that's something you'd want." He let out a breath, long and quiet. "You're serious." "I've never been more." He didn't answer right away, but then he crossed the room and kissed her forehead, slow and steady. "When I was a kid," he said, "I used to think love looked like big things, flashy things. But now I know it looks like someone choosing you over and over, no matter how complicated it gets." She took his hand. "So what do you say?" "I say yes, but only if I get to build the porch." Mara laughed. "Deal?" Brandon stirred then, mumbling something about dragons. Shane scooped him up gently. "I should get him home," he said. "He's got school in the morning. I'll walk you out." They stepped into the cool night air. The rain had stopped and the pavement glistened under the streetlights. At the truck, Shane turned. "You know, there's one thing I still can't wrap my head around." "What's that?" You're this brilliant, powerful woman, and somehow you saw something in me." Mara leaned in, brushing her lips against his. "I saw everything." He climbed into the truck, settling Brandon across the seat and rolled down the window. "Don't forget, I want to be part of the design process," she called after him. "Especially the kitchen." "You're getting your own tool belt," he said, grinning as he pulled away. She stood in the driveway long after the taillights disappeared, the night wrapping around her like a promise. 3 months later, the land near the lake bloomed with new beginnings. The foundation was poured, the framing stood tall, and Brandon had already claimed the wide backyard for his imaginary kingdom. Every step of the build was a shared decision. A sunroom for Mara's reading nook, a workshop for Shane's tools, a treehouse planned for Brandon with a rope ladder and a telescope, and the porch wide and welcoming was the first thing finished. On the day they painted the final beam, Brandon held up his hands, palms streaked with blue. "Are we done yet?" "Almost," Shane said, wiping his brow. Mara leaned against the railing. "It's perfect." Shane looked at her, paint on his shirt, dust in his hair, and said, "So are you." That evening, they sat on the porch swing, watching the lake catch fire under the sunset. Brandon lay curled in a hammock nearby, clutching a dog-eared comic book. Shane reached for Mara's hand. "I never thought this would be mine. It's ours," she said. He nodded. "Thank you for seeing past everything I wasn't." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You were always enough. You just needed somewhere to belong." And as the evening breeze drifted through the trees, carrying the scent of wood and paint and something new, Shane kissed her, no hesitation, no fear, just certainty. They had built this together, not out of money, not out of luck, but out of love. Real, undeniable, and theirs. Mara stood barefoot on the half-finished hardwood floor, the sharp scent of cedar and varnish drifting through the open windows. The air was thick with heat, but she didn't care. Her fingers trailed along the edge of the newly installed kitchen island, tracing the smooth grain. Every cabinet, every doorknob, every beam had been chosen together. They hadn't hired a contractor. Shane had insisted on building it himself with his own hands, his own sweat, because he said, love was worth building slowly. Behind her, the screen door creaked, and Shane stepped in, his shirt clinging to his back, sawdust still in his hair. "You didn't answer when I called," he said, setting a toolbox on the counter. "I was thinking," Mara replied, not turning. "Dangerous," he teased, stepping closer. "I was thinking," she said again, "that everything in my life used to be about control. About making sure no one could ever take anything away from me again. My company, my money, even that house, it was all about holding tight." She turned to face him. "And then you showed up, with one hammer and a little boy who didn't care how clean my floors were." Shane's expression softened. "You let us in." "I did, and I'm not afraid anymore." He stepped forward, brushing her hair off her forehead. "It's strange. I used to think I'd always be in survival mode, patch the roof, pay the bills. Keep my head down and don't ask for more. And now, you taught me I don't have to live like that," he said. "You made me want more, not just for me, for Brandon, for us." Mara reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I signed the papers this morning." "What papers?" "I'm stepping down from Jennings and Vale." Shane blinked. "You're serious?" "I appointed a new CEO, someone I trust. I'll stay on the board, but I want to be here. I want to pick Brandon up from school. I want to finish this house with you. I want to wake up and not have my name on every headline." Shane was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said into her hair. "You showed up," she whispered. They stayed like that until Brandon burst in from the yard, cheeks red, holding a mason jar with something squirming inside. "I caught a frog," he announced proudly. "Can we keep him?" Shane looked at Mara, and Mara looked at Brandon. "Only if he doesn't snore," she said. A week later, they held a small gathering on the finished porch. Nothing flashy. Just a few friends, some homemade lemonade, and a string of lights hung between the beams. Brandon wore a little button-down shirt and announced to everyone that he had 2 homes now, the Frog's Tank and this house. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Shane stood from the porch swing and cleared his throat. Mara looked up from her seat, eyebrows raised. "I had this whole speech planned," he said, reaching into his pocket. But none of it really fits anymore, because I don't want to talk about the past. I want to talk about what's next. He knelt on one knee. Mara's hand flew to her mouth. This isn't about making things official, Shane said, his voice steady. It's about promising that I'll keep building with you, not just this house, but every single day after it. You, me, and Brandon. No matter what. So, Mara Jennings, will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. Yes. The guests clapped. Brandon ran in circles yelling something about cake, and Shane slipped the simple gold band onto her finger. Later that night, after everyone had gone, they sat together on the porch steps, the stars scattered above them like confetti. Do you ever miss the city? Shane asked softly. Not once, Mara replied. Do you ever miss being alone? He shook his head. Never. In the distance, the lake shimmered in the moonlight, calm and sure. They didn't need anything else, not headlines or bank accounts or corner offices, just each other. And the life they'd built, one piece at a time, 5 years passed. The house stood tall by the lake, now surrounded by flower beds and Brandon's ever-expanding collection of tree forts. The porch swing had faded from the sun. The kitchen had already seen 3 birthday parties and 1 flower explosion, and the workshop out back was cluttered with wood shavings and half-finished projects. Inside, Brandon, now 10, was at the table, working on a science project involving small motors and far too much glue. Shane leaned over him, offering help but mostly just watching with pride. Mara stepped in from the garden, gloves in one hand, her other hand resting gently on her belly. Shane looked up and smiled. How's our newest little project doing? She's kicking, Mara said, walking over. Brandon's head snapped up. Mara grinned. Ultrasound confirmed it this morning. Brandon let out a whoop of excitement. I'm going to teach her how to build stuff. You're not teaching her how to use a blowtorch until she's at least 6, Shane said. They all laughed. Later, after Brandon was tucked in and the house had grown quiet, Shane joined Mara in the nursery. The walls were soft green, the crib already assembled. A mobile of tiny stars hung above it, spinning slowly with the breeze. You did this while I was out? Shane asked. She nodded. Figured I'd surprise you. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. You're still full of surprises. She leaned into him. And you still make me feel like the luckiest woman alive. Outside, the porch light flickered on with the timer, casting a warm glow over the steps. And inside, the family they'd built through honesty, forgiveness, and a love neither expected stood quietly together. Hearts full, future certain, they had everything they needed, and everything they ever wanted.